Shadow Slave. By Guiltythree. Chapter 13-14, Revelations of Madness. Shielded by the sin of solace, Sonny was suddenly capable of pushing through the mist again. He backed away as the defiled smiled wider. "Where are you going, murderer? Don't you want to learn a secret? You won't regret knowing it." "Ah, maybe you will." Sonny did not know what was happening, but he was sure of one thing: whatever it was that the Mad Prince wanted to tell him was not something he should ever learn. Unless he wanted to become as mad and broken as the defiled abomination was. It was already crazy enough to be fighting for his life, or rather, for his humanity, within a dream. Which he was dreaming inside the third nightmare. Staggering away, Sonny called upon his shadows. Instantly, 3 figures rose from below. Taciturn saint, scrawny imp, and a tenebrous steed shrouded in darkness. The Mad Prince exploded with laughter. "Good, good. Oh, this makes me feel nostalgic. Saint was the first one to fall." Before she could even move, a sword suddenly flashed, followed by a turbulent whirlwind of surging mist. The graceful stone knight froze, a thin crack suddenly appearing on her onyx armor. Then, as silently as she had been born, Saint crumbled into 1,000 shards of black stone. A cloud of ruby dust exploded into the air, painting the still water crimson. "Saint." Sonny's eyes widened, but before he could do anything, the sin of solace pushed him away. "Run, you bastard. She's not real." The imp was second. The little fiend hesitated, visibly scared by the tattered figure of the Mad Titan. However, then, it bravely jumped forward, reaching for the flesh of the defiled with his claws. The invisible sword whistled again, and the scrawny figure suddenly staggered. With liquid flames flowing out of Imp's mouth, he looked at Sonny with a frightened expression. Then, his eyes grew dim, and his little head slid off his neck, falling into the water with a quiet splash. Ah! Sonny felt as if his own mind was on the verge of breaking. Pressing down the tempest of pain and guilt raging in his heart, he gritted his teeth and turned away. His hand grasped Nightmare's mane, and with a stifled scream, he jumped onto the stallion's back. The dark courser was already galloping away through the swirling mist. The Mad Prince's laugh reached them from behind. "Where are you going, murderer? I am not done with you." Sonny did not turn to look back. Gripping the sides of Nightmare with his thighs, he raised both hands and pressed them to his ears. "Don't listen. Don't listen." However, he still heard it. The voice of the sin of solace, who said with a hint of resignation in his hateful, familiar voice. Sonny's own voice. "Damn lunatic. Are you trying to steal my job?" He had never been so happy to have a wraith born from the whisper of the demon of dread stuck in his head before. Nightmare flew through the mist, and soon, the veil of it obscured the Mad Prince and the sin of solace, muffling their voices until nothing except silence remained. Sonny had also turned into himself. Finally. He had a human body once again, as well as 2 human hands. The dark mantle was replaced by the soft silk of the Shroud of Dusk. Looking down, he patted the black steed on the shoulder and let out a shaky breath. I think we are safe now." Then, he hesitated for a moment and added in a small voice, "But do you think that I can wake up now?" Nightmare huffed and struck the surface of the still water with his hooves, soaring high into the air. As they rose higher and higher, the mist grew thinner and thinner, until eventually a ray of sunshine broke through its blinding veil. And as soon as it did, Sonny woke up with a start. Arg! He sat up, covered in cold sweat. With his heart beating wildly, Sonny grabbed at his chest and froze, looking around the dark room of the desolate temple. Slowly, his panic started to dissolve. A dream. It was just a dream. Sonny slowly exhaled, then shuddered and shook his head. No. It might have been a dream, but it definitely had not been just a dream. He did not know what kind of power could have allowed the Mad Prince, who was most likely either dead already or far, far away, to appear in his nightmare. However, he was certain that the creature he had met in the dream was not a simple figment of his imagination. Sonny did not know whether the tattered abomination he had faced was the defiled Titan himself or some echo left behind by his passing, but he knew that hearing the secret the abomination wanted to share would have been the end of him. Gods damn it. Even the dreams aren't safe here. As his heart calmed down a little, he sat in silence for a while, trying to gather his thoughts. There were a lot of strange things about that dreadful dream. However, before he could consider them carefully, a sudden worry clouded his mind. Sunny hurriedly sent his shadows to check on Nephi's and Anank. Making sure that both were sleeping peacefully in the neighboring rooms, he then shuddered at the memory of his shadows being destroyed and proceeded to summon them one after another. He called upon the Dark Courser first. As the Sin of Solace said, Saint and Imp should not have been real. The Black Steed could be summoned into his dream because that was the nature of Nightmare's powers, but the other two were different. So, only Nightmare had actually faced the Mad Prince. Most likely. The Black Stallion appeared in the shadows, keeping to his intangible form. He seemed agitated, but otherwise unharmed. Relieved, Sunny let out a long sigh. "Thank you, buddy. You really saved my hide there." Dismissing Nightmare, he summoned Saint next. The graceful knight appeared out of the darkness, as stoic and indifferent as ever. She was unharmed. Feeling as if a great burden had been lifted off his heart, Sunny closed his eyes for a moment. "You're safe. Thank the gods." Saint gave him a strange look, but remained silent. "Well, of course she did. Go back now." "No, actually, stay here. Keep watch throughout the night, all right?" The graceful knight stared at him for a few moments, then turned away and silently left the room to stand guard in the corridor. Sunny took a deep breath and rubbed his face. Now, only Imp remained. He summoned the scrawny goblin, then scratched the back of his head. "Ah, right. That little rascal is still stuck digesting the armor of the black turtle. Damn it, when will he stop lazing around and—" But before Sunny could finish the thought, a frightening figure suddenly rose from the shadows. Towering above him like a demon forged out of dark steel and sharp blades. Arg, what the— Unbeknownst to Sunny, the little rascal had already awakened from his slumber. Only he wasn't so little anymore. Chapter 13:15, Steel Devil. Sunny had grown accustomed to calling his youngest shadow an imp. However, now the ravenous fiend was finally worthy of his fearsome name. The creature in front of Sunny could not be called little, nor could it be called scrawny. It was almost as tall as Saint, towering above him like a demonic warrior whose body had been forged out of dark steel in the infernal flames of hell. There were a lot of similarities with how Imp had looked during their last battle in Falcon Scott. But there were also differences. The original ravenous fiend had been tall, but gaunt. His body had been covered in thick plates of black bone armor, and he was as ferocious as he was stealthy, like a vengeful wraith born out of hungry darkness. The new and improved Imp, however, was not gaunt. Instead, he seemed like a knight clad in a suit of plate armor. That armor was not made out of bone, either, it was made out of a strange dark metal. The ravenous shadow had seemed like he was forged out of black steel before, but the look of his metallic body was changed now. It acquired a dark sheen and a glossy quality, as though the transcendent devil had been cast out of black silver or covered in a layer of dull chrome. There were changes in the design of his armor, too. It was as though Fiend had been forged out of countless broken swords. There were curved blades growing from his elbows and knees, as well as ferocious spikes rising here and there from his dark armor. His face was hidden behind the visor of a fearsome helmet, with twisting horns rising from it and a jagged line breaking its surface where the Fiend's terrible mouth was hidden, brimming with dagger-like teeth. His claws were like short swords, and in his ferocious eyes, infernal flames burned with intense heat. See, crap. And that demonic monstrosity was currently staring at Sunny with an extremely nasty expression in its glowing orange-red eyes. Sunny awkwardly cleared his throat. Ah. Hey there, buddy. Imp's mouth split in a sinister grin, releasing more heat and infernal glow. Sunny forced out a smile. Wow. You look great. I guess all that delicious magical steel I found and fed you. Out of nothing but pure kindness, maybe. Really did you some good, huh? He coughed. Say. You wouldn't be remembering all the times I kicked and berated you, would you? Or, thinking about strange things like revenge. Would you? Imp took a step forward, the glow of his demonic eyes and incinerating maw falling on Sunny's face. His grin widened, the sharp steel teeth glinting in the darkness. His voice sounded like a roaring flame, like revenge. With that, Imp raised his hand. In that moment, Sunny's expression changed, and he added evenly, because if you do, you master will have a good reason to find out just how sturdy this new body of yours is. Imp's grin froze for a moment, and his hand did too. He hesitated for a moment, and then carefully fixed a crease on Sunny's tunic. The steel fiend growled politely, "Master." "Good." Then, he backed away, stared at Sunny for a bit, and hurriedly left the room. Sunny let out a relieved sigh, then smiled. Ah. They grow up so fast. One of his shadows followed Imp into the corridor to see what the big guy was up to. Moving too silently for a creature of his size and weight, the steel devil approached Saint and stopped next to her, as if to join her in guarding the rooms. There they stood, Saint and Fiend. Imp was acting as nonchalantly as the taciturn knight was, but Sunny did not miss the fact that the bastard was puffing out his chest and secretly throwing glances at Saint, as if waiting for a reaction. After a while, the stone knight finally turned her head and stared at the steel fiend indifferently. Imp seemed to have secretly held his breath. Saint remained motionless for a while, then raised her hand and casually flicked the fiend's chest with a finger. After hearing a melodious ring, she tilted her head a little. Finally, the graceful knight nodded curtly and turned away. Imp looked beyond himself. Maintaining a stoic facade worthy of his ferocious appearance, he also looked away and returned to silently guarding the corridor. However, the flames in his eyes were dancing jubilantly. Sunny scoffed. "This ugly idiot. Ah, he's seriously cute." He shook his head, then summoned the runes to learn exactly what had changed about Ravenous Fiend, except for appearance. The runes read, Shadow, Ravenous Fiend. Shadow rank, Transcendent. Shadow class, Devil. Shadow description, Shadow attributes. The had become. Its description read, Attribute description. It seemed that consuming the silver armor of the black turtle had not only improved the quality of the alloy from which Imp's body was made, but also removed all the remaining imperfections from it. Granted, Sunny was inclined to take its supposed flawlessness with a grain of salt. After all, he had recently learned that flaws were one of the universal laws of the world. Still, if the spell deemed it necessary to call Imp's newly evolved body flawless, he had to be very close to having no physical vulnerabilities. It seemed that Sunny finally had another powerful shadow to face the most dire enemy side by side with. Imp was now perfectly capable of participating in battles alongside Saint and Nightmare, reaching the fearsome level of power that a transcendent devil was supposed to possess. With his indestructible steel body, which was a weapon in and of itself, as well as his dual affinity for shadows and flame, the ferocious fiend would be a terror on the battlefield. Good. Just in time. Sunny's face grew somber. Things had been calm for a while, ever since Anank had found them. But he knew that there were plenty of harrowing battles waiting for them in the depths of the tomb of Ariel. Chapter 13:16, Limits of Power. Imp. Or was Sunny supposed to call him Fiend now? Did not get new abilities. Which was logical, really, since the black turtle was only a monster, and the gluttonous shadow had not even consumed the flesh of the abominations, only its armor. Still, the scrawny goblin had become a fearsome ogre. He was going to significantly increase Sunny's battle power, not the least because of his carefully chosen diet. Sunny had given up on feeding Ravenous Fiend a lot of valuable stuff so that his growth did not become muddled. Imp's main affinities had to be established first, steel and shadows. The flames he had absorbed from the colossal body of the Sun Prince were a pleasant side effect, increasing the power of the Steel Devil's attacks. But what Sunny had really wanted was to make his youngest shadow as indestructible as possible. Saint possessed an incredible level of defense, which was only made greater by her masterful battle prowess. But Imp was different. If not guided cautiously, he could have ended up being vulnerable. Considering the types of situations Sunny often found himself in, that vulnerability was bound to result in him losing his first shadow sooner rather than later. Survivability was king. He had regrettably proven it himself over and over again, clinging to life by the skin of his teeth on many occasions. Which was why Sunny was so impressed by how hard to kill the original scavenger had been. He had experienced the toughness of the spiteful fiend's bone armor personally, after all, and wanted to make Imp at least as durable. If the ravenous shadow managed to approach the level of defense Saint possessed, that would have been even better. In that regard, Sunny seemed to have overshot his initial goal. By a lot. Imp's was not only as durable as Saint's graceful body was, but vastly more so. His metal carapace was sturdier than her stone-like armor, and much more importantly, that durability encompassed the entire body of the ravenous devil, not just its surface. Although Saint was hard to wound, she was actually quite vulnerable once her armor and resilient skin were breached. The internals of her miraculous stone body were well protected, but fragile. The ruby dust that flowed out of the wounds like blood was proof of that. Ravenous Fiend, however, was now fully tempered, both outside and inside. There were no vulnerabilities that an enemy could exploit, at least not an enemy using physical attacks. Which meant that while Imp could deliver fearsome blows, his true power lay in being nearly impervious to physical harm. He could become the shield of the shadow cohort. Or a punching bag. Sunny scratched the back of his head and looked in the direction where Imp was standing, hidden from view by a wall, with a guilty expression. The poor guy had not realized what the future held for him, had he? Sorry, buddy. He shook his head and remained silent for a while, thinking. There were two fully matured transcendent devils serving him now. Sunny himself had become unbelievably strong due to Shadow Dance, at least for an Ascended. If augmented by Nephi's, his power was probably comparable to some saints now, enough to give him a fighting chance, if nothing else. If Sunny was assisted by his shadows, most saints would probably be the ones at risk, not him. And that was without Soul Serpent, who should have become the strongest of the shadows by now. But still, that power was not enough. After experiencing the dire perils of the upper reaches of the great river, and knowing that he would have to venture far downstream, into the distant past, Sunny knew that even his current ridiculous level of strength was not enough to slay the kind of adversaries he would be facing. The problem was, I am almost at my limit. There were very few things he could realistically achieve in a short amount of time to increase his power even further. The only feasible one was helping Nightmare evolve into an Ascended Terror and unlock his ability. That was going to happen relatively soon, but after that, Sunny would reach a dead end. With a lot of effort, he could potentially become a terror. But even that boost was not going to be significant enough to change the odds in his favor. More memories, and stronger ones at that, were not going to cut it either. Sunny had grown a lot, more than any master in history had, perhaps, but now, his head was pressed against an indestructible ceiling. The only way for him to leap to a new height was by breaking that ceiling and becoming a saint. Which could only happen after the nightmare, meaning too late. Of course, he had recently learned from Anank that people could transcend without the assistance of the spell, that path was open to him, but sadly, Sunny did not have 100 spare years or more to slowly learn how to do just that. What was left, then? He frowned. Actually, I am thinking about it all wrong. Sunny had been a loner for most of his life, and even after learning how to rely on others and trust his friends, he still put a lot of meaning into personal strength. Which was not exactly unwise. But, at the same time, served as an artificial limit. Although he had not lived through Nef's second nightmare, the lesson she had learned there resonated with his own experiences. Personal strength was important, but it paled in comparison to true power. Take Antarctica, for example. Sunny had achieved incredible things there, but he had not achieved them alone. The evacuation of hundreds of millions of civilians was only possible because the government had mobilized vast resources to send the first and second evacuation armies into the southern quadrant. Without the irregulars, without the mundane soldiers and thousands of awakened who had fought and died to save the people of Antarctica, Sunny would not have achieved anything. His personal strength was nothing when compared to the united determination of all those brave people. It was the same here in the third nightmare. Sunny had to destroy a dire enemy, the forces of defilement populating the corrupted city of Verge and the 6 plagues that ruled it. Dread Lord, Torment, Undying Slaughter, Soul Stealer, Devouring Beast. And Mad Prince. So why was he only thinking about his personal strength? Wasn't the power of his allies also his power? Nephi's, Cassie, Effie, Kai, Jet, and even Mordred. They were as much a part of his power as Saint, Imp, and Nightmare. Since Sunny had reached the ceiling of what he himself could achieve as a master, wouldn't it be wiser for him to put his efforts into empowering his allies? This is it. Shrouded in darkness, Sunny slowly nodded. That was the path he had to take if he wanted to survive the nightmare. After reaching Fallen Grace, he and Nephi's had to find the rest of the cohort. And once they found them, Sunny had to make sure that his friends, and Mordred too, grew as powerful as possible. He had to make them into a force capable of defeating the 6 plagues. For their sake, and also his own. Sunny sighed and closed his eyes for a moment. The future was daunting. But when had it not been so?